The road had once been a wheat field by August 1944. It had become a graveyard stretching for miles. German tanks lay torn open, their steel hulls twisted like crushed tin. Self-propelled guns sat half-buried in ditches. Dead horses were piled along the roadside because the German army still used horses to haul its guns. The air was thick with burned fuel, cordite, and the sickly sweet smell of bodies decomposing under the summer sun. Allied officers who passed through later gave it a simple name: the Corridor of Death. Here an entire German army had been destroyed, not in a single dramatic clash, but slowly, hour by hour. But the dirtiest part of this battle was not on the ground. It was on paper. On August 20th, 1944, while wrecked vehicles still burned and wounded men lay groaning in field hospitals, a report was sent to Allied Supreme Headquarters. The man who wrote it was one of America's most famous generals. The man who read it commanded every Allied soldier in Europe. The report did not invent numbers. It did not fabricate victories. It did something far more dangerous, and described the battle accurately, and then quietly replaced the name of the winner. If that report stood unchallenged, Canada would lose the greatest victory of its war, not because it had failed on the battlefield, but because it had been erased from the record. And the only man who could stop that from happening sat alone at his desk, staring out a window, the report resting in his hands. August 1944, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, near Granville, France. Dwight D. Eisenhower sat behind his desk reading a freshly delivered field report. Commander of the United States Third Army. The date at the top read August 20th, 1944. Patton's words carried his familiar tone, confident, forceful, unmistakably proud. He wrote that his army had sealed the trap around the Germans, that Third Army had destroyed the German Seventh Army, that victory at Falaise belonged to American troops under his command. Eisenhower set the paper down. He was not angry. He was not surprised, because he knew something Patton hoped would go unchallenged. Just hours earlier, from the north, Canadian and Polish forces had closed the final gap. They had done what Patton had not: pushed directly into the killing ground against the most fanatical German divisions still fighting in France, and paid for it in blood for 10 brutal days. Canadian units had fought without pause. They advanced across open farmland through villages turned into fortresses. Every mile gained cost lives. The pocket had not been sealed by speed, it had been sealed by casualties. Eisenhower looked out the window. This was no longer a tactical question. The battle was effectively over. German resistance was collapsing. Paris would soon be free. If he stayed silent, Patton's report would become the official record. American newspapers would repeat it, future historians would cite it, and in the story of the greatest encirclement battle on the Western Front, Canada would be reduced to a footnote. But if he spoke up, he would challenge something just as dangerous as the enemy. The ego of America's most celebrated general, adored by the press and hailed as the symbol of victory. The timing could not have been worse. 80 days had passed since D-Day. Allied troops had stormed the beaches of Normandy and fought through hedgerows that turned every field into a fortress. Thousands had died to break the German line. Now at last the line had snapped. In the south, American forces had advanced rapidly. In the north, Canadian forces had taken the heaviest losses. Between them, near the town of Falaise, tens of thousands of German soldiers were trapped in a pocket that was closing fast. The question was simple, but its consequences were enormous. Who would be remembered as the army that closed the trap? Which nation would claim the victory that broke German power in Normandy? Patton had already answered that question in his report. Now Eisenhower had to decide whether that answer would stand. And to understand how a single document could steal a national victory, one had to return to the battlefield itself, do a race measured in 12 miles, where speed, blood, and reputation collided. 12 miles on a map, it looked insignificant, a thin stretch of countryside between two advancing Allied armies. On the ground, it became one of the most important distances of the war. In August 1944, everything in Normandy was suddenly moving fast. For 7 brutal weeks after D-Day, Allied soldiers had fought yard by yard through the hedgerows. Thick earthen banks and tangled roots turned every field into a fortress. Progress had been measured in bodies, not miles. Then in late July, the deadlock finally broke. American forces punched through the German line near Saint-Lô. The front collapsed. German units began pulling back in confusion. For the first time since June, the Allies had space to maneuver, and when space appeared, a new idea took hold. Instead of chasing the Germans eastward toward Germany, the Allies would destroy them right here in France. They would trap the retreating enemy in a massive encirclement, a closing fist that would crush German power in Normandy in a single blow. The target was clear. German Army Group B was retreating through a narrow corridor near the town of Falaise. If Allied forces could close that corridor, tens of thousands of German soldiers would be caught inside, with nowhere left to go. Two armies were assigned to do it. From the south, the American Third Army would sweep east, then turn north. From the north, the 1st Canadian Army would push south. Somewhere between them, the trap would snap shut. But there was a problem. Closing a pocket was not just about geography. It was about timing, pride, and who arrived first, because whoever sealed the gap would claim the victory, and whoever claimed the victory would claim history. Underscore, 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 underscore. His armored columns surged across southern Normandy, overrunning German rear guards, capturing towns almost faster than they could be named. It was exactly the kind of war Patton loved: fluid, aggressive, decisive. By August 13th, American units had reached Argentan, south of Falaise. From Patton's perspective, the end was in sight. The gap between his army and the Canadians to the north was shrinking rapidly. At one point, it measured roughly 12 miles. 12 miles stood between Patton and the moment he had waited for his entire career, the chance to personally destroy a German army in the field. Patton wanted to keep going. He sent urgent messages up the chain of command, asking for permission to push north past Argentan, to drive straight toward Falaise and close the pocket himself. He believed his army could do it in a single day, but the answer came back: no. The boundary lines were fixed. The plan was already set. Canadian forces were attacking south, and American forces were ordered to stop at Argentan and hold position. The reasons were practical and deadly serious. If American units surged north while Canadian units pushed south, there was a real risk of catastrophe. Smoke, dust, and confusion already filled the battlefield. Supply lines were another concern. Patton's tanks were burning fuel faster than it could be delivered. His flanks were stretched thin. A sudden German counterattack could turn speed into disaster. To the planners at Allied headquarters, stopping at Argentan was sound military judgment. To Patton, it felt like sabotage. In his private diary, he wrote that he was being deliberately held back to let others take the glory. He believed his momentum was being wasted. He believed that politics, not tactics, had stopped him. And most of all, he believed that someone else was about to steal a victory that should have been his. Dundroke? Underscore, 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 over the score. They were not racing forward across open roads. They were preparing to attack head-on into the strongest German defenses left in Normandy. The 1st Canadian Army faced a grim task. To reach Falaise, they had to advance across open farmland with little cover, against elite German formations that knew exactly what was at stake. These German units understood one simple truth: if the pocket closed, they were finished. Encirclement meant capture or death, so they fought accordingly. The Canadians launched their attack knowing the cost would be high. Villages became killing zones. Fields turned into graveyards. German SS units defended every hedgerow, every farmhouse, every rise in the ground. Every mile southward came with casualties measured in the hundreds. From the Canadian perspective, this was not a race. It was an endurance test. They were not trying to arrive first. They were trying to survive long enough to arrive at all. And yet the pressure of the race was always there. Every hour, the gap remained open. German soldiers poured through it. They abandoned tanks, trucks, and artillery. but they saved their lives. Thousands escaped eastward, slipping through the narrowing corridor like water through a crack in a dam. The distance between the two Allied armies shrank, 12 miles, 10-5. At one point, the gap was reduced to just 3 miles. 3 miles that might as well have been a wall of fire. Underscore 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 stir as. It was about national standing. Canada had fought in Europe since 1939, often under British command, often overshadowed by larger allies. Here, for the first time, Canadian forces were operating at full army level under Canadian leadership. The eyes of the nation were watching. If the Canadians succeeded, it would prove they belonged among the top military powers of the Allied coalition, not just as brave soldiers, but as commanders capable of winning decisive battles. If they failed, the old assumptions would remain. Meanwhile, the American press was already celebrating Patton's advance. The narrative was forming even before the battle was finished. Patton understood this better than anyone. He knew that history favored the first report, the loudest voice, the most confident claim, and he also knew that while his army waited at Argentan, the Canadians were paying the price. Underscore 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 is. Polish armored units fighting under Canadian command advanced toward the village of Chambois from the north. American units were already positioned to the south. The gap between them had shrunk to a few desperate miles. German soldiers inside the pocket could see the walls closing in. Columns of vehicles jammed the roads, bumper to bumper. Some units fought desperately to keep the corridor open. Others simply ran. As evening approached, Canadian and Polish forces made their final push. At 7:20 p.m., in the fading light, a Polish patrol entered the village square at Chambois. American soldiers were already there, taking cover behind ruined buildings. Then an American lieutenant stepped forward and extended his hand. A Polish officer shook it. The northern and southern pincers had linked on the map. The pocket was closed on the ground. The killing continued, but the race was over. The Canadians and Poles had crossed the last miles under fire. They had sealed the trap. They had paid the highest price to do it. And while they were still fighting for their lives, while wounded men were still being carried from the fields, Patton sat down and began writing his report. In that report, he would claim the victory, not by lying about the battle, but by deciding who deserved to be remembered for it. Closing a pocket on a map did not end the battle. It only changed the way men died when the northern and southern pincers met near Chambois. On the evening of August 19th, the encirclement looked complete, lines connected neatly on staff maps. Arrows pointed inward. To anyone far from the front, the problem appeared solved. On the ground, it was anything but inside the pocket. Tens of thousands of German soldiers suddenly understood what encirclement truly meant. Retreat was no longer an option. Roads were jammed with vehicles, abandoned guns, burning fuel trucks, tore through columns that could no longer move forward or back. Some German units surrendered immediately. Others decided to fight their way out. For them, every remaining gap, no matter how small, was a lifeline. And that meant the real work of closing the trap had only just begun. Underscore 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 buscore utter buscore buscore underscore modescore non-defor bostor yevers go discore bor. Their units were stretched thin, exhausted, and bleeding. Yet now they were ordered to hold ground at all costs while coordinating with Polish and American forces to seal every remaining opening. This was not a dramatic breakthrough, it was a grim, grinding containment. German soldiers poured toward the edges of the pocket in waves. Some attacked in organized units, others came in desperate mobs, discarding weapons, running on foot, driven by fear alone. Canadian artillery fired almost continuously. Gun crews worked until their hands blistered, barrels glowed, and ears rang so loudly they could no longer hear shouted orders. Infantry units dug in along roads, hedgerows, and small rises in the ground, firing at silhouettes emerging from smoke and dust. Every hour the line held mattered. Every hour it failed meant thousands more Germans escaping to fight again. The cost was staggering between August 14th and August 19th. Entire companies were reduced to handfuls of men. Medics worked until they collapsed from exhaustion, dragging wounded soldiers from fields swept by machine gun fire. This was the price of sealing the trap. Doshro underscore storg underscore 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 on a stretch of high ground that controlled the final escape routes. Hill 262. To the soldiers who fought there, it was known simply as the Mace. From its crest, the land dropped away in every direction. Roads below funneled German traffic eastward. Whoever held that hill could see and strike everything. The task of holding it fell to Polish, armored and infantry units fighting under Canadian command. They arrived battered, low on supplies, and already short of ammunition. They would leave worse. For 2 days, German forces attacked Hill 262 from multiple directions. Units trapped inside the pocket charged uphill, hoping to smash through the thin Allied line. At the same time, German formations outside the pocket attacked from the east, trying to punch inward and reopen an escape route. The Poles were caught between them, surrounded on 3 sides, outnumbered and fully aware that if they failed, the entire encirclement could collapse. They held machine guns overheated and jammed, rifle barrels burned to the touch. When ammunition ran low, soldiers stripped weapons and cartridges from the dead friend and enemy alike. Artillery observers directed fire until German shells forced them to relocate. Again and again, day turned into night. Night turned back into day. Rain fell. Then heat returned. Men fought on with little food, little water, and no sleep. German infantry attacked repeatedly, sometimes advancing over the bodies of those killed minutes earlier. Tanks tried to push up the slopes only to be knocked out at close range. The hill became a killing ground, and still the Poles did not withdraw. Dutro underscored underscore 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 underscores underscore underscored underscore 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 duscore underscore 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 ascore underscore. Canadian units pushed forward to reinforce the Poles, fighting through German counterattacks to reach the high ground. American forces maintained their positions to the south, holding firm against breakouts. Slowly, brutally, the escape routes vanished. Inside the pocket, chaos reached its peak. German columns disintegrated. Officers lost control of their men. Some soldiers tried to flee on foot through fields and forests. Others surrendered en masse, raising white flags made from shirts, bandages, anything they could find. The roads told the story better than any report ever could. Burned-out tanks lined the ditches. Trucks sat smashed nose to tail. Artillery pieces were abandoned, with their breeches blown open. Crews long gone or dead. Dead horses lay everywhere, their bodies bloated under the sun. The German army still relied heavily on horses, and thousands had been caught in the artillery storms that swept the pocket. The smell became overwhelming. Veterans later said it was impossible to describe. Fuel, decay, death, all mixed into something that clung to clothes and skin long after they left the battlefield. This was the battlefield that decided Normandy. Not a clean victory, not a heroic charge, a slaughter paid for mile by mile. By August 21st, the outcome was beyond doubt. The pocket was sealed. More than 50,000 German soldiers were captured. Tens of thousands more lay dead or wounded. 15 German divisions ceased to exist as fighting forces. German Army Group B, which had defended Normandy since D-Day, was effectively destroyed. Strategically, it was one of the most decisive victories of the Western Front, but victory came with a ledger. Canadian forces alone had suffered more than 5,000 casualties. Polish units lost over a third of their strength holding Hill 262. American losses in the Argentan sector were far lower, not because they had failed, but because their role had been different. Numbers told the truth, so did the ground. Underscore, 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 r-score, 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 r-score. And as exhausted soldiers tried to process what they had survived, another battle was already taking shape far from the front. A battle over words. On August 20th, while fighting still raged, while Polish soldiers were still clinging to Hill 262, Patton sat down to write his report. In it, he described his army's rapid advance. He emphasized reaching Argentan first. He highlighted American courage and success. What he did not emphasize was who had closed the pocket. He mentioned the Canadians only briefly. He said nothing of the casualties that had made the encirclement possible. To Patton, reaching Argentan was the decisive act. To the men who had fought north of Falaise, that claim felt like erasure. They had done the hardest fighting, they had taken the heaviest losses, and now they were watching their victory being renamed. Crow. Underscored, underscored, underscore, underscored, underscored, underscore, underscore, underscored, underscore, 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 underscore. Anger mixed with exhaustion. Soldiers who had watched friends die in wheat fields and village streets now heard that someone else was taking credit for the result. Officers read Patton's claims and compared them to their own casualty lists. The numbers did not match the narrative. Senior Canadian commanders understood what was happening immediately. In coalition warfare, the first report often shaped the story, and correcting it later was always harder. If Patton's version stood, it would not matter what the battlefield showed. History would remember the wrong army, and somewhere far from the smoke and wreckage, one man understood this better than anyone else. Eisenhower. He had seen the casualty figures. He had studied the maps. He knew who had advanced where and who had paid what price. The battlefield had already rendered its verdict. Now Eisenhower had to decide whether that verdict would be honored or overwritten. And to do that, he would have to confront the most difficult part of command, not fighting the enemy, but telling a powerful subordinate that he was wrong. If the Falaise Pocket was a trap, then Hill 262 was its lock. A low rise of ground east of Chambois. It did not look impressive on a map. No dramatic cliffs, no towering peaks, just a stretch of high ground overlooking the narrow roads that funneled German troops out of the pocket. But whoever controlled that hill controlled escape, and in August 1944, escape meant survival. For the Germans, Hill 262 was the last door left open. For the Allies, it was the one position that could not be allowed to fail. The task of holding it fell to the Polish 1st Armored Division, fighting under Canadian command. They arrived knowing exactly what was coming. Darage, underscore, 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 jur, arster, arster, arscore, barster. Columns of soldiers, vehicles, and wagons pushed eastward toward the roads beneath Hill 262. hoping to break through before the ring tightened completely from the hilltop. Polish observers could see everything. They watched German traffic jam the roads below, bumper to bumper trucks burned, tanks abandoned their crews, horses collapsed under artillery fire, dragging wagons sideways into ditches. It was a scene of total collapse, but it was also a warning. Those men would not surrender quietly. Underscore, 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 underscore. If they could retake Hill 262, or even force the defenders off it for a few hours, tens of thousands of soldiers might escape. So they attacked from inside the pocket. German infantry charged uphill in repeated waves. From outside, fresh units attacked from the east, trying to punch inward and reopen the corridor. The Polish defenders were caught between them, attacked from three directions with limited ammunition and no room to retreat. The hill earned its nickname quickly, the Mace, because every blow landed there. Underscore, 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 underscore. The fighting was savage and close. German infantry advanced through shell craters and tall grass, using the dead for cover. Machine guns rattled nonstop. Mortar rounds slammed into Polish positions, throwing dirt, shrapnel, and bodies into the air. Polish gunners fired until their barrels overheated. Riflemen burned their hands reloading. When ammunition began to run low, soldiers crawled among the dead, stripping cartridges from fallen comrades and enemies alike. There was no pause. Daylight brought heat and dust, night brought rain and exhaustion. Men fought without sleep, without food, barely aware of the time passing. At several points, German units reached the crest of the hill. Each time they were driven back, sometimes with grenades, sometimes with bayonets, sometimes with nothing but rifle fire at point-blank range. Polish officers understood the stakes perfectly. If Hill 262 fell, the encirclement would unravel, could shift. What had been a decisive victory could turn into a partial escape. So they held even when German tanks attempted to climb the slopes, even when artillery fire shook the ground beneath them, even when casualties mounted with terrifying speed. They held. Underscore, 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 for the soldiers inside the pocket. This was their last chance. For the units attacking from outside, it was their duty to save their trapped comrades. The hill became a magnet for violence. Shells landed constantly. The noise was deafening. Smoke choked the air. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and friendly fire became a constant risk. Polish artillery observers called in fire on targets just meters from their own positions. Canadian guns answered, pouring shells onto German concentrations. Moving toward the hill, the coordination was imperfect, the danger was enormous, but it worked. Each German assault was broken, each attempt to reopen the corridor. Dario, underscore, 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 underscore. Casualties were severe. Some Polish units had lost over a third of their strength. Men fought on through wounds, binding their injuries and returning to their positions. Reinforcements were desperately needed. Canadian units pushed forward through German counterattacks, fighting their way toward the hill to relieve the defenders. Infantry advanced under artillery fire, using shell holes for cover, dragging wounded with them. When Canadian soldiers finally reached the Polish positions, the relief was immediate and sobering. The hilltop was littered with spent shell casings, destroyed weapons, and bodies, barely standing, but still alert, still fighting. They had not broken. Sure underscore 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 underscore. Others tried to flee on foot through fields and forests, only to be cut down or captured. The road network beneath Hill 262 turned into a slaughterhouse. Burned-out vehicles stretched for miles. Artillery pieces sat abandoned where crews had fled. Dead animals lay everywhere. The smell carried for days. This was the scene Allied commanders would later describe as one of the greatest killing fields of the war, and Hill 262 had been the key. Borders, underscore, 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 underscore. The pocket was sealed. German Army Group B ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. The remnants of 15 divisions were destroyed, captured, or scattered beyond recovery. From a military standpoint, it was a triumph. From a human standpoint, it was devastating. Thousands lay dead. Thousands more were wounded. And yet, even as the fighting finally slowed, something else was already unfolding. Far from Hill 262, far from the corridor of death, far from the men who had held the line, words were being written, reports were being filed, and those words would decide how this battle would be remembered. Underscore 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 underscore. It did not speak of Hill 262. It did not speak of Polish units fighting surrounded for 2 days. It did not speak of Canadian infantry pushing forward under artillery fire to hold the line. It spoke, instead of victory, reclaimed, clean, and American. To the men who had fought on that hill, the omission was not an oversight. It was a theft, and Eisenhower knew it. He had seen the maps, he had read the casualty figures, he had studied the intelligence summaries. Hill 262 told the truth more clearly than any report ever could. The question now was whether that truth would survive, because correcting a battlefield mistake was easy. Correcting a narrative, especially one written by a famous general, was something else entirely, and Eisenhower was about to step into the most dangerous terrain of all. Not a hill under artillery fire, but a confrontation where words. The fighting at Falaise ended on August 21st. The argument over who won it was only beginning. While burial parties worked through the wreckage and medics searched for survivors, the battle quietly moved from the fields of Normandy to the corridors of Allied hex, artillery, or terrain. It was about words. Dwight D. Eisenhower did not respond publicly to Patton's report. He did not issue an immediate correction. He did not call a press conference. Instead, he gathered evidence. He read intelligence summaries from every army involved. He studied maps marked with unit positions and casualty figures. He compared times, advances, and orders. And then 2 days after the pocket closed, he went to see the battlefield himself. The road east of Falaise had already earned its name, the corridor of death. Eisenhower's driver took him slowly along roads still clogged with wreckage. Destroyed tanks sat with their turrets blown off and thrown yards away. Artillery pieces stood abandoned, their crews dead or captured. The vehicles were packed so tightly that, in places, it was possible to walk for hundreds of yards without ever touching the ground. But it was not just the machines. Dead horses lay everywhere, thousands of them. The German army still relied on horses for transport, and artillery fire had torn through entire columns. The August heat had been cooking the bodies for days. The smell was overwhelming. Eisenhower later wrote that the scene could only be described by Dante. This was the batter. By the time he returned to headquarters, the decision was already made. Underscore, 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 underscore. The meeting took place behind closed doors. There was no stenographer, no recording, no official transcript. What happened inside that room was later reconstructed from staff briefings, diary entries, and second-hand accounts. But the core of it was clear. Eisenhower spoke first. He did not attack Patton personally. He laid out facts, calmly, precisely, and without room for argument. He told Patton that he had read every report, that he had studied every map, that he had visited the battlefield and seen the destruction with his own eyes. He acknowledged what Third Army had done. Reaching Argentan had been important. Holding the southern shoulder of the pocket had been essential. Patton's forces had performed their assigned mission exactly as ordered. But then Eisenhower drew the line. Reaching Argentan was not the same as closing the pocket. The Canadians and Poles had clung to German resistance. They had taken the highest casualties. They had held Hill 262 under attack from multiple directions. That was the reality, and Eisenhower told Patton that his next report would reflect it. Underscore, 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 I. He complained that he was being forced to give credit to the Canadians for political reasons. He insisted that his army could have closed the pocket itself if it had been allowed to continue. Even in private, Patton could not accept the distinction Eisenhower was making. To him, speed equaled victory, but Eisenhower was not arguing about speed. He was arguing about truth. Coalition warfare depended on it. If soldiers from different nations were asked to fight together, bleed together, and die together, then the record had to reflect who did what. Anything else would poison the alliance from within. Eisenhower made that clear. Patton could disagree, he could complain. But the official story would not be a lie. Underscore, 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 underscore. Eisenhower followed words with action. On August 25th, Supreme Headquarters released an official statement. The language was careful, deliberate, and unmistakable. It stated that the 1st Canadian Army, including Polish and British forces, had completed the northern encirclement. German forces at Falaise. Third Army's role. Eisenhower also sent a detailed report to the combined chiefs of staff, the highest military leadership of the United States and Britain. In it, he credited Canadian and Polish forces with closing the pocket and described their casualties and achievements in plain terms. Finally, he spoke privately with political leaders. History would argue enough on its own. Underscore, 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 or store, underscore. But in his diary, he remained unconvinced. He continued to believe that his army had been denied its rightful glory. The correction satisfied Eisenhower, but it did not erase the damage. Patton's initial claim had already circulated. The idea that Third Army had sealed the trap lingered in popular accounts. The truth had been restored on paper. Whether it would survive in memory was another matter. For Eisenhower, the episode marked one of the most difficult decisions of his command. He had not punished Patton. He had not humiliated him publicly, but he had drawn a boundary. Victory did not belong to the loudest voice. It belonged to those who paid the price. The confrontation at headquarters ended quietly, without witnesses or headlines. But its impact reached far beyond that room, because in standing up to his most famous general, Eisenhower had made a choice that would echo long after the guns fell silent. The question now was not what Eisenhower said to Patton. It was what that decision would mean for the men whose blood had closed the trap, and for how the war itself would be remembered. The guns around Falaise fell silent, but the consequences of the battle did not. In the days that followed, the battlefield itself told a story no report could hide. Wrecked vehicles lay scattered for miles. Burial teams worked without pause. Medics treated wounded from every army, friend and enemy alike. The scale of destruction was undeniable. So were the numbers. More than 50,000 German soldiers had been captured inside the pocket. Tens of thousands were dead or wounded. 15 German divisions were shattered beyond recovery. German Army Group B, which had defended Normandy since D-Day, no longer existed as a fighting force. The road to Paris was open. Strategically, Falaise was decisive. Historically, it was about to become contested. These Dura underscore 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 juror discore one. Soldiers who had advanced across open ground under artillery fire now saw headlines crediting others for the outcome. Officers compared casualty lists with press reports and noticed the imbalance immediately. They had fought the hardest battles, they had paid the highest price, and yet their role was already being blurred. Senior Canadian commanders understood how quickly this could harden into permanent myth. In coalition warfare, the first version of events often became the one most people remembered. Corrections came later, if they came at all. Polish reactions were quieter still. The first Polish armored division too. More than 1 in 3 men had been killed or wounded in 2 days of fighting. They had held the key ground that prevented German escape, yet many of those soldiers knew that recognition was unlikely to follow them home. Poland's future was already being decided far from Normandy, and it did not include independence. For many Polish veterans, Falaise would become another victory remembered everywhere, except in their own country. Dori, Dorster underscore, Doster underscore, 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 underscore. They had read the same intelligence reports Eisenhower had read. They understood that reaching Argentan and holding position was not the same as sealing the pocket, but Patton was their commander. Loyalty ran upward. Some officer recorded their doubts in private diaries, perhaps hoping that the real story would surface one day. In war, silence was often the safer choice. At higher levels of command, Eisenhower's decisions set a precedent. British commanders, including Montgomery, supported the corrected record. DTO reports emphasized Canadian and Polish roles in closing the encirclement. Underscore, 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 underscore. Allied forces surged across France. German units retreated toward the Siegfried Line. New battles replaced old ones in headlines and briefings. Falaise became a chapter, not the story, and chapters are easily rewritten. Popular accounts, simplified events, films and books focused on famous personalities. Names like Patton became shorthand for Allied victory, while the complexity of coalition warfare faded into the background. For Canada, this mattered deeply. Falaise was not just another battle. It was proof that Canadian forces could command, plan, and execute a decisive operation at army level. It was a moment when Canada fought not as a supporting actor, but as a central force. If that moment disappeared from memory, something important disappeared with it. Eisenhower understood this. That was why he went beyond a single confrontation. He ensured that official statements were clear. He reinforced the record in reports to Allied leadership. He spoke privately with political leaders to prevent future distortion. He did not seek attention for himself. He sought accuracy. In his memoirs years later, he would again credit Canadian and Polish forces for closing the northern pincer at Falaise. He would describe the battle as one of the greatest killing fields of the war and emphasize the cost paid by those who fought there. To Eisenhower, memory was not about pride, it was about responsibility. For the soldiers themselves, memory took quieter forms. Some returned home and never spoke of Normandy again. Others wrote diaries, kept photographs, or attended reunions. Decades later, Polish veterans scattered across exile communities. Canadian veterans carried the knowledge that whatever the headlines, they had closed the gap, and they had done it together. Dutter underscore duster Worcester _the Geiderster. It was about whether sacrifice would be acknowledged or absorbed into someone else's legend. Eisenhower's intervention did not erase every false account. It did not silence every exaggerated claim, but it drew a line that said truth mattered more than ego. And Coalition Normandy ended in August 1944. The battle for memory would last far longer. Years passed. The fields around Falaise grew quiet again. Wheat returned to the soil. Roads were repaired. What had once been a killing ground became countryside once more. But memory does not fade as easily as scars in the earth. For the men who fought there, the battle never truly ended. It followed them home in fragments, sounds, smells, faces that appeared without warning. Some spoke about it. Many did not. Canadian veterans returned to farms, factories, classrooms, and city streets. Polish veterans returned to exile. Some became laborers, engineers, bartenders, men who had commanded tanks far from the places where they had fought. History moved on, and for a time so did the story of Falaise. Simplified, shortened, reduced to a footnote beneath larger names and louder legends, it almost worked. Degré underscore 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 casualty lists told a story no headline could erase, and slowly over decades the record hardened again. This time in stone, memorials rose on Hill 262, and around Falaise, names were carved where words could no longer be edited. Canadian, Polish, British, and American units stood side by side in lists that could not be rearranged for convenience. The ground itself testified. So did the enemy. German commanders interviewed after the war were blunt. They knew where their army had been destroyed. From their perspective, there was no confusion at all. The pocket had collapsed in the north. Darus underscore 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 underscore. It is about who gets remembered when wars are over. Wars create heroes quickly, but they erase the ordinary just as fast. At Falaise, thousands of men did the hardest work of the war without expecting recognition. They advanced under fire, held impossible ground, and paid a price measured in blood. They did not give interviews, they simply closed the gap. Eisenhower understood that when he chose accuracy over convenience, he was not defending a nation's pride. He was defending the principle that sacrifice deserved acknowledgement. A truth mattered even when it was uncomfortable. Because once truth is surrendered. Allies instead of lessons. Rico underscore 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 underscores underscore over ground where history was almost rewritten, but it was not because someone spoke up. Because the record held, because those who paid the price were not erased, and that may be the most important victory of all.